Laura stood by the kitchen window, the evening light spilling across the counter as she stirred a pot of soup. The quiet hum of the house had become her comfort over the years. Ever since she married David, life had settled into a calm rhythm, simple dinners, weekend drives, and laughter shared over morning coffee. But there was one piece of their life that still felt distant: David's son, Ethan. Ethan had been polite and respectful from the day she met him, but never close. He'd grown up mostly with his mother in another state, and by the time he came to visit, he already had his own world, college friends, dreams, and plans that didn't include family dinners or heart-to-heart talks. Laura understood that. She didn't push. She just tried to be kind in quiet ways: a warm meal waiting, a smile when he walked in, a soft word when he left. That Thursday afternoon, her phone buzzed with Ethan's name. He rarely called unless it was something important. She wiped her hands and answered, her tone bright. "Hey, Ethan. How are you?" "Hi, Laura," he said, sounding relaxed, maybe even a little excited. "I'm good. I was wondering if you and Dad will be home this weekend. I'd like to stop by." "Of course," she said, smiling. "We'll be here. Everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's great, actually," he replied. I want you to meet someone." Laura froze for a moment, her mind catching on the last two words. "Meet someone? Oh," she said with a small laugh, trying to sound casual. "Someone special?" "Yeah," Ethan said with a grin she could hear through the phone. "Her name's Emma." After the call ended, Laura stood in the quiet kitchen for a long time. She should have been simply happy for him, and she was, but she couldn't explain the odd flutter of nerves that rose inside her. It wasn't about jealousy or worry, just a strange anticipation. Maybe it was because this was the first time Ethan had introduced anyone to them. Maybe she just wanted it to go perfectly. When David came home from work, she told him the news. He smiled, proud and lighthearted as always. "That's wonderful. Our boy's finally serious about someone." He kissed her cheek and chuckled. You should have seen the way he avoided the topic of relationships for years. This must be special. That night, Laura stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. She brushed her hair carefully, changed her sweater twice, and checked her reflection again. It wasn't vanity, it was nerves. She wanted to look warm and welcoming. She wanted Ethan's girlfriend to feel comfortable. Saturday arrived cool and gray, typical for Seattle in early fall. Laura baked a pie, the scent of cinnamon and apples filling the house. David set the table while humming under his breath, cheerful as ever. When Ethan's car pulled into the driveway, Laura's heart beat faster. The doorbell rang. David opened the door first, his voice full of delight. "Ethan, hey son." Laura stepped out of the kitchen just as Ethan walked in with a young woman beside him. She had soft brown hair tied in a loose ponytail and kind eyes that seemed to light up the moment she smiled. "This is Emma," Ethan said proudly. Slipping an arm around her, Laura smiled automatically, but something in her froze. The name, the smile, the eyes. For a split second, she forgot how to breathe. Emma extended her hand politely. "It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Carter." "Please, call me Laura," she said, taking her hand. The warmth in Emma's touch startled her, felt strangely familiar. Dinner started easily enough. Ethan told stories about work. Emma laughed at David's jokes. And the room was filled with that comfortable sound of a family coming together. Laura listened, laughed when appropriate, and tried to shake off the odd feeling in her chest. But every time she looked at Emma, something tugged at her memory. The curve of her smile, the small tilt of her head when she laughed, it reminded Laura of someone she hadn't thought about in years. At one point, David asked Emma how she and Ethan met. She explained they'd met through mutual friends at a local event in Portland. And Ethan jumped in, teasing her about who had made the first move. Everyone laughed, but Laura's attention snagged on one word: Portland. She felt her pulse quicken. "Oh, you're from Portland?" she asked gently. Emma nodded. "Well, a small town outside of it, actually. That's where I grew up. My mom raised me mostly on her own." Laura's spoon froze midair. A small town outside Portland? Her mind raced back through time, back 2 years ago, before David, before this life. A quiet neighborhood, shared cups of coffee. Late night talks with a woman she'd once called her closest friend, your mom. Laura asked softly, would her name happen to be Claire? Emma blinked in surprise. Yes, you know her. Laura felt her stomach twist. She forced a smile, though her voice trembled slightly. We were very close once. A long time ago. Ethan looked between them, confused. Wait, you knew Emma's mom? Laura nodded slowly, her thoughts spinning. The coincidence was too strange, too sharp to ignore. Claire had been her best friend years ago, before life pulled them apart. They'd shared everything once. Dreams, heartbreaks, the kind of friendship that felt like family. And now Claire's daughter was standing in her dining room, holding her stepson's hand. Dinner continued. But the warmth in Laura's chest had turned into something more complicated. Every time Emma spoke, Laura heard echoes of the past, the same soft voice, the same hopeful tone that used to fill her apartment years ago. She found herself smiling at Emma, not just out of politeness, but out of affection she couldn't explain. When Ethan and Emma left that night, the house grew quiet again. David turned to Laura, smiling. She's lovely, isn't she? She really is, Laura said softly, but as she washed the dishes later, her reflection in the kitchen window seemed lost in thought. The world outside was gray and still, and inside her heart, old memories stirred ones she had carefully folded away. It wasn't just the past that unsettled her. It was the way fate had brought it right to her doorstep, smiling in the form of a young woman named Emma. She thought of Claire, the laughter, the sudden silence between them, the years that had passed without a word. What were the chances that their paths would cross again like this? Through their children, of all people. Laura didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Not after everything life had shown her. That night, lying beside David as he drifted off to sleep, she stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying every detail of Emma's face. The warmth in her voice, the kindness in her eyes, the faint ache of recognition that had never fully left. Whatever this was, she knew it wasn't just a simple introduction. It was something deeper, something the universe had quietly set in motion, and deep down, Laura felt that this was only the beginning. The weekend after Ethan and Emma's visit, Laura couldn't stop thinking about that night. Every time she tried to focus on something else, her work, cooking, or reading, the image of Emma's face returned. There was something hauntingly familiar about her expressions, her laughter, even the way she listened when people spoke. It wasn't just resemblance anymore. It felt like a living echo of a life Laura had left behind. On Monday morning, as she prepared breakfast, David noticed her silence. "You're thinking about Ethan's girlfriend, aren't you?" he said, smiling over his coffee. Laura hesitated. "She just reminds me of someone from a long time ago." David looked at her curiously. "That Claire you mentioned?" She nodded. "Yes. I can't stop wondering if it's really her daughter. It feels strange, doesn't it? The world is big, and yet somehow paths cross again when you least expect it." David reached for her hand and gave it a squeeze. "Maybe it's a sign. Maybe it means something good." Laura smiled faintly, though a quiet unease lingered. She wasn't sure what kind of sign it was. A few days later, Ethan texted again. "Emma's coming by for dinner. Hope that's okay?" Laura stared at the message for a moment before replying, "Of course. Can't wait to see you both." When Saturday came, Laura made her favorite lemon chicken and baked bread from scratch. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was simply her way of showing love. The doorbell rang right on time. Ethan came in first, grinning as always, followed by Emma, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "For you, Laura," she said warmly. "Oh, you didn't have to," Laura said, touched. "They're beautiful." Dinner was easy, filled with stories and laughter. David asked about their plans. Ethan talked about a new project at work. And Emma spoke about volunteering at an art center in town. Her voice carried a calm confidence that made everyone listen. "You work with children?" Laura asked, surprised. "Yes," Emma said, smiling. "I help with their creative programs, painting, storytelling, anything that lets them express themselves." It's my favorite part of the week." Laura felt something stir in her chest. Years ago, she and Claire had volunteered at a small community center doing the same thing. It was one of the happiest times of her life. When everyone finished eating, Ethan offered to clear the dishes. David followed him to the kitchen, leaving Laura and Emma alone in the living room. Emma looked around, admiring the cozy setup. "You have such a warm home," she said softly. "It feels lived in, full of love." "Thank you," Laura replied, touched by her sincerity. "I always try to make it that way." There was a pause, a gentle, quiet moment filled with unspoken recognition. "Emma." Laura began carefully, "Your mother. She must be proud of you." Emma smiled, but her eyes softened. "She is, though she doesn't say it often. She's strong, independent, but sometimes she hides her feelings. I think she's afraid to reopen old wounds." Laura's breath caught. The words hit too close to home. That was exactly who Claire had been, brave, but guarded. Loving, but afraid to be hurt again. "Did your mom ever mention anyone named Laura?" she asked, her voice steady, though her heart raced. Emma's brow furrowed for a second. "Actually, yes. She said she used to have a friend by that name. Someone she cared about a lot, but they drifted apart. She never told me why." Laura smiled gently, masking the sting of emotion. "Sometimes life pulls people in different directions," she said softly. Emma nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "Maybe, but sometimes I think people are meant to meet again when the timing is right." That line stayed with Laura long after the evening ended. When Ethan and Emma left, the house felt oddly quiet, almost sacred, as if something important had been spoken into existence. That night, Laura couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, looking out at the rain-slicked streets. The memories she had buried long ago began to rise. Afternoons spent painting with Claire, late-night talks about love and heartbreak, and the painful day they had parted ways without a real goodbye. She remembered the argument. It wasn't loud or cruel, just full of disappointment. Claire had wanted to leave Portland for a new start. Laura had begged her to stay, afraid of losing the only person who truly understood her. But Claire had gone anyway, leaving behind silence and an empty promise to stay in touch. Years had passed. Laura moved on, built a new life, found love again with David, but she never stopped wondering what became of Claire. And now, by some twist of fate, her best friend's daughter was dating her stepson. The next morning, Laura decided to call her old friend, even if she wasn't sure what she'd say. She found Claire's number still saved in an old contact list, like a piece of history she never deleted. Her hands trembled as she dialed. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Laura hung up before leaving a message. Maybe it wasn't time yet. Maybe life wanted her to reconnect through Emma first, to understand, to forgive, to see that the past could heal in unexpected ways. In the days that followed, Emma became a frequent visitor. She helped Laura cook, talked with David about travel, and sat with Ethan on the porch, sharing quiet laughter. Laura watched them together and felt both joy and ache. It was like watching two worlds she loved begin to merge, the past and the present intertwining in front of her eyes. One evening, while folding laundry, Laura overheard Ethan and Emma talking softly in the next room. Emma said, "Your stepmom is amazing. She reminds me of someone my mom used to talk about. She said that person had the kindest heart she'd ever known." Ethan chuckled. "That sounds like Laura." Laura paused mid-fold, her throat tightening. It was her. Claire had spoken about her after all. Despite the years, despite the distance, she hadn't been forgotten. Later that night, as she tucked the folded clothes away, Laura felt something shift inside her. The pain of the past wasn't gone, but it was changing. Maybe it wasn't about what had been lost, but what was returning slowly, gently, through a new generation. When she looked at Emma now, she didn't just see her best friend's daughter. She saw a bridge, a quiet reminder that love, friendship, and forgiveness have their own way of finding a path home. And though Laura still hadn't spoken to Claire, she knew that moment was coming. Maybe through Emma's smile, The universe was whispering to Hertz, not too late. The next time Emma visited, she brought her camera to take family photos. "Let's make some memories," she said cheerfully, as the camera clicked. Laura stood beside David, Ethan, and Emma, the afternoon sunlight wrapping them in gold. And for the first time in years, she felt something deep and certain peace. But under that peace, there was also anticipation. Because Laura knew the truth couldn't stay hidden much longer. Somewhere out there, Claire still existed. And soon, she would know that their lives had crossed again, this time through the love of their children. The past was no longer gone. It was right here, alive in her living room, smiling back through Emma's eyes. The days following that second dinner carried a strange warmth through Laura's home. Emma had become part of their lives as naturally as sunshine fills a quiet room. She visited often, helping with dinner, chatting over tea, or simply sitting in the garden with Laura while Ethan and David fixed things around the house. What had started as polite visits began to feel like family gatherings, and Laura found herself looking forward to them more than she cared to admit. But beneath that growing comfort was a feeling she couldn't quite name. Every time Emma smiled, something deep inside Laura stirred. It wasn't romantic, it was emotional, almost spiritual. It was as though she were seeing an old friend's spirit reflected in a younger face. Emma's kindness, her gentle humor, her quiet strength, it was all Claire. Sometimes Laura caught herself wanting to say things like, "You remind me of her," but she always stopped, unsure how much Emma knew or how much she should reveal. One afternoon, while Ethan and David went to a football game, Emma stayed behind to help Laura clean out the attic. They found old boxes filled with photos, letters, and dusty keepsakes from Laura's life before she met David. The air was thick with nostalgia and dust, and Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through an old photo album. "You are beautiful," she said softly, smiling at a younger Laura in a picture with long hair and bright eyes. Laura laughed lightly. "That was a long time ago. I think we all look beautiful in our 20s. Emma turned another page and paused. "Who's this?" she asked, pointing to a picture of two women sitting on a park bench, laughing, arms around each other. Laura's breath hitched. She hadn't seen that photo in years. "That's an old friend," she said carefully. "She looks lovely," Emma said. "You two look close." Laura took the photo, her eyes softening. Her name was Claire." Emma blinked, her voice dropping. "My mom's name is Claire." The attic grew very still. The only sound was the faint hum of the old ceiling fan. Laura felt her pulse quicken, her throat dry. She forced a small smile. "It must be a coincidence," she said quietly. But her voice wavered just enough for Emma to notice. Emma looked at her closely. "You said you were from Portland once, right?" Laura nodded slowly. "My mom grew up there too," Emma said, her expression thoughtful. "She told me about a friend named Laura. She said she was the kindest person she ever met, but they lost touch after something." Laura's heart ached. She wanted to tell her everything, but fear held her back. Fear of opening old wounds, of bringing up pain that belonged to another lifetime. So she just nodded and said softly, "She was a wonderful person." They didn't talk about it again that day. But after Emma left, Laura sat alone in the attic long after sunset, the photograph still in her hand. She felt tears sting her eyes, not of sadness, but of something bittersweet. It was as if life had quietly handed her a second chance she didn't know she needed. In the following weeks, Emma became even closer to her. They talked about life, choices, and dreams over cups of tea in the kitchen. Laura found herself opening up about her younger years, not about Claire directly, but about who she used to be. She spoke of love, mistakes, and forgiveness. Emma listened with the same thoughtful calm that Claire once had. One evening, while Emma was helping Laura decorate for the holidays, she said something that stopped Laura's heart cold. "You know," Emma said softly, hanging an ornament on the tree, "I think my mom still carries a lot of guilt about losing someone she cared about." She said some friendships break not because people stop loving each other, but because they don't know how to fix what's broken. Laura's throat tightened. She turned away, pretending to adjust a ribbon. "That sounds like something I'd say," she whispered. Emma smiled. "Then maybe you'd get along with her?" Laura couldn't sleep that night. She sat by the fireplace, watching the flames flicker. Her mind full of memories, late-night talks with Claire, tears shared over heartbreaks, laughter so pure it made the world feel lighter. She remembered the day it ended, an argument over choices, pride getting in the way of love. Two stubborn hearts that couldn't say sorry now. Sitting there in her living room decades later, Laura realized she'd never truly stopped missing her. The thought of seeing Claire again scared her and comforted her all at once. The next morning, Laura decided to take a small step. When Emma arrived that afternoon, she gently handed her the photograph they'd found. "This is for you," she said. "Keep it safe." Emma looked down at the picture of the two young women laughing in the park. "Thank you," she said softly. "She want to see this." Laura froze. "You're going to show it to her?" Emma nodded. "Of course. She'll be shocked, but I think it'll make her happy." For a moment, Laura couldn't speak. Her emotions tangled between fear and hope. "Just tell her I remember her kindly," she said at last, "and that I wish her well." Emma smiled, touched by the tenderness in Laura's voice. "I will." That night, after Emma left, Laura told David everything. She told him about her past with Claire, the friendship, the laughter, the argument, the years of silence. David listened without judgment, holding her hand as she spoke. "I think you should see her again," he said finally. "Sometimes the past doesn't come back to hurt us. Sometimes it comes back to heal." Laura nodded, her eyes shining with quiet tears. "I hope you're right." Over the next few days, she waited anxiously, wondering if Emma had shown her mother the photo. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped. Nothing came. No call, no message. Maybe it was too much. Maybe Claire didn't want to reopen the past. Then one afternoon, Emma arrived unexpectedly. She looked nervous but happy. "Laura," she said, "I showed my mom the picture." Laura's breath caught, and Emma hesitated. She cried. "She said she's wanted to find you for years but didn't know how. She thought you might not forgive her." Laura pressed a hand to her heart, her voice trembling. "Oh, Claire. She asked if you'd be willing to talk," Emma said softly. "Not today, not right away, but soon. She just wants to hear your voice." Tears welled in Laura's eyes. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then she smiled through the tears. "Yes, tell her I'd like that." Emma hugged her, and for the first time, Laura hugged her back tightly, as though embracing both the past and the present at once. When Ethan and David walked in a few minutes later, they found the two women laughing through tears. The photo lying between them on the table. David raised a brow. Something good happened. Laura looked up, her eyes bright. Something long overdue. In that moment, Laura realized something beautiful. This wasn't just a coincidence. Life had brought Emma into her world not only to reconnect her with her stepson's happiness, but also to mend a part of her heart she had quietly carried broken for years. The past was no longer something to avoid. It had come home, wrapped in kindness, forgiveness, and a girl named Emma. The following week moved slowly for Laura. Each day felt heavy with anticipation. Her thoughts circling around one thing, Claire. After all these years, the name still held weight in her heart, like a melody she never forgot. Sometimes she would catch herself staring out the window, wondering how Claire looked now, what kind of life she had built, and whether she ever thought about the old days as much as Laura did. Ethan noticed her quietness. "You've been distracted lately," he said one evening. "Everything okay?" Laura smiled faintly. "Just thinking too much, I suppose." But Emma knew. She didn't say anything in front of Ethan, but later, when they were alone, she took Laura's hand and whispered, "Mom wants to meet you." For a moment, Laura couldn't breathe. The words she'd longed to hear were finally real land yet. Fear flooded in. "Are you sure she wants that?" she asked softly. "It's been so long. I don't even know what I'd say." Emma smiled reassuringly. You don't have to plan what to say. Just talk. She's nervous too. A few days later, Laura found herself standing in front of a small cafe by the waterfront. The wind carried the scent of salt and coffee, and her heart pounded so loudly she could almost hear it echo. She hadn't seen Claire in over 20 years. She had imagined this moment 100 times in her mind. But now that it was here, she felt like that young woman again, unsure, hopeful, scared. She stepped inside. The cafe was quiet, with soft music playing. Then, across the room, she saw her. Claire. Her hair was streaked with gray. Her face marked by time, but her eyes, those same warm, soulful eyes, hadn't changed. She stood up, her lips parting in a trembling smile. For a second, neither woman moved. Then Laura took a deep breath and walked forward. Hi, Claire, she said, her voice soft but steady. Laura, Claire whispered, her eyes shining. I can't believe it's really you. They hugged, and for a long moment, time seemed to stop. The weight of years melted away, replaced by the quiet relief of two hearts finding each other again. When they finally sat down, both laughed nervously, unsure where to begin. Claire spoke first. I saw the picture Emma brought home. I must have stared at it for hours. You haven't changed as much as you think. Laura smiled. And you're still terrible at lying. They laughed, and for a few minutes it felt like old times again. Then came silence, the kind that holds truth waiting beneath it. I'm sorry, Claire said finally, her voice trembling, for everything, for leaving the way I did, for not calling. I should have reached out. Laura shook her head gently. No, I should have. We were both proud, both hurting. I was angry, but mostly because I missed you. Claire looked down, tears in her eyes. I was going through so much then. I didn't know how to handle losing my relationship, raising a child, starting over. I pushed everyone away, even you. Laura reached across the table and took her hand. We were young. We didn't know how to hold on to people properly. But we're here now. Claire squeezed her hand, smiling through tears. You always knew the right thing to say. They talked for hours about the years that had passed, the lives they'd built, the mistakes and the lessons. They laughed about the old stories, cried over the things left unsaid. And somewhere between coffee cups and fading daylight, forgiveness quietly settled between them. When they finally left the cafe, the air outside was cool, and the city lights reflected softly on the water. Claire looked at her and said, I never thought life would give me this chance again. Laura smiled. Me neither, but I think it sent Emma for a reason. Claire nodded, emotion flickering in her eyes. She said the same thing. That meeting you felt like fate. The two women hugged again, and it felt like the end of a long storm. Later that evening, Laura returned home, her heart lighter than it had been in years. David was waiting in the living room. So, he asked, hopeful. She's still Claire, Laura said simply, and she's still my friend. David smiled warmly. I'm glad. The following weekend, Emma and Ethan came by again. This time, Laura greeted them with an ease she hadn't felt before. Emma noticed it instantly. You saw her, she said, beaming. Laura nodded. I did, and thank you, Emma, for everything. You don't know what this means to me. Emma smiled softly. I think I do. They spent the evening together, laughing, eating, sharing stories. There was no tension now, only peace. When Emma left that night, she hugged Laura longer than usual. Mom wants to invite you and David over soon, she whispered. A proper dinner, like old friends. Laura's eyes warmed. Tell her I'd love that. Days turned into weeks, and what began as a surprising reunion slowly grew into something steady and familiar. Laura and Claire began meeting often, sometimes for lunch, sometimes just for a walk by the water. The first few meetings were emotional, full of tears and apologies, but eventually, laughter returned. They spoke not as people haunted by the past, but as women who had learned, grown, and forgiven. One chilly afternoon, as they sat in a park overlooking the bay, Claire said quietly, You know, when Emma told me about Ethan, I didn't think much of it. I never imagined he was your stepson. But now I can't help feeling that everything happened just the way it was supposed to." Laura smiled, her heart full. "I think you're right. Maybe our children brought us back together because we weren't finished with our story." Claire looked at her and nodded. Maybe love of any kind never really ends. It just waits for the right time to return. A soft breeze rustled the trees. Laura felt tears prick her eyes again. Not of sadness this time, but gratitude. After so many years of distance and silence, life had given her something rare, a second chance to make peace with her past. That evening, back at home, she sat with David by the fire. Ethan and Emma were laughing in the kitchen, teasing each other as they cooked. Laura watched them with a tender smile. "You know," she said quietly, when Ethan said he was bringing his girlfriend, "I never imagined she'd bring my past back with her." David chuckled softly. "Life has a funny way of doing that." Laura leaned against him, her heart content. "Does. But I'm glad it did." As the night settled, the house filled with the warm hum of family laughter. Clinking plates, the smell of food, and the comfort of togetherness. Laura looked around and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, complete. She had lost a friend once, but through time, love, and a little twist of fate, she had found her again. Not just through a reunion, but through a bond that stretched across generations, through Emma, through forgiveness, and through the quiet strength that comes when hearts choose healing over regret in the end. It wasn't about the past anymore. It was about the present, the family she had, the friendships restored, and the reminder that love in all its forms always finds its way home. And though she never expected any of this the day her stepson introduced his girlfriend, Laura now knew the truth. Sometimes life doesn't surprise you to test you, it surprises you to heal you.